of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, well, we got a full agenda. We'll try to move through it. I like your new wording on when the meeting starts, so hopefully this satisfies for you and everybody else. I think it's pretty clear. First item of business, I'm assuming we've done the FOIA correctly, Sarah. Let me know if we haven't. And she's nodded yes. And looking for approval of the agenda as it was posted.
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, York. Second? Mark?
Second.
Mark seconds. Any discussion, any changes, anything else we're missing? Any objections? Agenda stands moved without objection. Next item is we have minutes from both September 20th and October the 18th to approve. Look for a motion to approve both of those.
I'll make the motion to approve.
Mark, thank you.
Second.
Second, York. Any discussion, any discrepancies that you saw when you read them in detail? Any objections? No objections. Those stand approved as drafted. Citizen comment. Sarah, do we have anybody here that online or present that wants to speak other than Joe wants to speak?
Joe wants to get out of here as quickly as possible.
One of these days you're going to have to speak to us.
We do not have anyone signed up, but there are a large amount of individuals online, so if any of them are here for public comment, they can speak.
Speak or forever hold your peace. Okay, next item is Jared's report. He's always busy, so we look forward to catching up on what you got going.
Absolutely. Thank you, Chairman and committee. Just a few quick things, and then I have someone I'd like to introduce briefly for an update. So first, just transportation. I failed to mention this at our last meeting in October, but I thought it was worthwhile for you guys to hear about because this is the kind of work that we're in, and we've got a lot of work done. But
It looks like they've started without turning on the audio.
You're absolutely right.
Kind of lost focus. Has anything transpired while we weren't able to listen?
Not that I'm aware of.
Well, basically just approve objection, the agenda and the minutes. No public comments.
We approved the minutes, we approved the agenda, and we just went through public comment, which there wasn't any, so this is the first thing that's on the agenda.
Okay, thank you.
all right, so just to kind of tell you about some things that are going on inside the engineering division, and this is one thing that happened in September. I failed to mention it in October, but I thought it was worthwhile. I wanted to make sure I brought it up to everybody's attention. But in our paving program, our resurfacing program, which is mostly funded through the CTC program, we have a 5-year paving schedule. Of that, we're in year 4, so we do one obviously each year. This past year, year 4, we had 12.7 miles, and we finished it on September 25th for a tune of $2.2 million. Included, you can see the roads out here around the detention center and the parking lot as well, Marsh Road, and around the complex. In total, though, this is the interesting part I wanted you to hear, is we have 208 miles of county-owned paved roads, of which we've, over the last 4 years in this program, touched 46 miles, 46 miles, which is a little over 22% of our roads. So we're keeping a good tabs on our roads as paved roads, keeping the good roads that we have in good conditions and upgrading the ones that are in poor or failing conditions and bringing them up to speed. So like I said, very important. Just wanted you guys to hear that. I failed to mention that at the last meeting. As far as
Jared,
yes, sir.
if I might ask this question, good job on getting the contracts ready and getting the roads paved. In your best estimate, when would you project the completion of all the dirt roads being paved in Beaufort County?
Dirt roads. So what I was just talking about was the actual paved roads, and it was just maintaining and resurfacing those. As far as dirt roads, we have As of 2020, we have 75 miles of dirt road paving, 209 roads, and we put about $2 million, $1.5 to $2 million a year towards that, and get about 4 roads. So a little quick math there. I would say we're about 36 years away. And I know I'm not trying to be funny. It's just continuing down the path with the funding that we have. We don't have that much funding. Funding comes from TAG Fund, which is something we'll also be talking about a little bit later today. But that is where we are. We do have a large amount of dirt roads and a small funding pot to tackle those.
Yeah, well, hopefully you and I'll still be around to see it completed.
Well, maybe one day we'll figure out a way to pour some gasoline on that and really accelerate that program. But that's where we are today.
Good.
Mr. Chairman, just quickly, I appreciate your comment about the about 20% of the county roads being resurfaced, et cetera. So we apparently got a good maintenance plan. It has nothing to do with you. But is there any way that we can put some, I mean, what would it take to get the state to do the same thing? There's too many state roads.
Several $1 billion.
In the county?
Well, several $100 million in the county. No, so the county, just the state, I don't know if you guys hear, I hear this all the time because I go to the DOT conferences and such, but the state of South Carolina is the 24th largest state in America. And they have the 4th largest state maintained road system. So they have over 46,000 miles of road, which is only short of California, Texas, and one other state. So to be as small as we are, we have a ton of roads. We also have one of the smallest gas taxes in America. They recently updated that, I think in 2018, we adopted the 12 cents, which was 2 years. So I think in 2022, we'll be fully funded to the 12-year mark. And so we'll be up at a relatively mid-range level of funding for our roads, but they're attacking that, I mean, systematically. Unfortunately, it's such a big system with poor funding that it's going to take time to raise all the roads to the level that they choose to.
Yeah. Okay.
Money, that's the big thing.
Okay, thank you.
But I will talk a little bit about money too in just a second as far as the infrastructure bill. So just a couple other things going on, and then we'll get to the meat of the agenda. I know we have a big agenda. I promise it won't take as long as it looks. But other things, solid waste. Proud to announce that we fully implemented the decal system as of November 1st, and relatively, it was pretty uneventful, which is something we try to strive for in most any event where we're putting out, and this time it actually worked. So anyhow, we'll come back on a routine basis and kind of give you an update on where that decal system is. Cindy mentioned it in her presentation at council retreat. It's a good position. It's going to help us with some savings, but those savings are soon going to get swallowed by growth and additional trash. So, but that's something praiseworthy to report on. Lastly, I have one other thing, and then I have an update from a consultant I want to introduce. As of 21 minutes ago, our President of the United States, I'm proud to announce, signed into law the $1.2 trillion Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act plan. That was signed at 3 p.m. today. So an email was sent out to council to describe what all was in that. I'll just read through it brief. It's about 10 items, but I think it's worthwhile for you just to hear the type of items that were included in the infrastructure bill. We had a gentleman present to us, I believe in September, Mr. Bernie Arsenal from one of the consultants we deal with, HDR. It's relatively unchanged since he made that presentation, but just to recap, bear with me for just a second as I read what's included in the $1.2 trillion. So roads, bridges, and major projects, $110 billion. Passenger and freight rail, $66 billion. Public transit, $39 billion. Airports, $25 billion. Ports infrastructure, $17 billion. Transportation safety programs, $11 billion. So far, I don't know if you noticed, but everything I've mentioned we have in Beaufort County. So it's not like all this stuff is stuff that doesn't belong here. Vehicles, $7.5 billion, electric vehicles. Zero and low emission buses and ferries, $7.5 billion. Revitalization of communities, $1 billion. Broadband, Councilman Dawson, you mentioned broadband.
Sorry, I couldn't hear what you said.
Sorry, that was Siri, sorry. Councilman Dawson, you'd mentioned broadband in our council retreat as far as ARPA. And this was one of the reasons, because we knew this was coming, $65 billion to the nation for broadband. Power infrastructure, $73 billion. Drinking water, $55 billion. Resilience and water storage, $50 billion. And removal of pollution from water and soil at $21 billion. So it's a sweeping bill. I think there's a lot of good things that'll come of it. A lot of things you'll continue to hear us talk about and how we're going to approach it from our end here at the local level. So the last bit, not to take a lot more time, is just an update. We didn't put this as an item, action item, agenda item, but wanted, Councilman Rodman, you had mentioned just a quick update on 170. I have our consultant, Mr. Ryan Eckery, with AECOM. He's on the line and has, I think, 2 or 3 just small, quick slides to give you an update where we are on that project. So if y'all bear with me. Ryan, are you available?
I am here. Can you hear me?
We can hear you. So I
Great.
think you wanted to share your screen.
Oh, I can do that. Sure. I think they said they might have embedded it. Let's see here. All right. Does everybody see my screen?
Yep, good to
Great.
go.
Well, thanks, Jared. I'll try to be brief, 5 to 10 minutes, hopefully. As mentioned, from the SC 170 core study just completed about 2 years ago, we are now moving forward with up to 9 improvement designs on this project, and I'm here to share the update on that. From the original contract, September 23rd, we identified in the core study the 5 short-term improvement projects. And if you look to the left, I have a map with numbers on them, kind of showing the locations where all these improvements are taking place. The first one's at Oakety Center Boulevard South, looking at a reduced conflict intersection, and I'll have a visual of what that looks like shortly. And number 2, US 278 westbound ramps. We're looking to put dual lane off ramps going left and right. Currently there today is just a single lane left and right, as well as looking at improving the flow for southbound 170, almost taking anybody who wants to access the loop ramp or 278 westbound to have its own little lane to improve congestion there and minimize that queue. And number 3, Argent Boulevard. I know there was a recent core study on that as well, looking at using the existing pavement there to restripe it to provide dual left turn lanes heading from Argent to the north towards Beaufort. And that's just using existing pavement as well as updating the signal as well. The next one, Tidewatch Drive at number 4, and I guess I can use my scroller here. This is more of a safety improvement. The left turns from 170 on a Tidewatch Drive have public comments said it was very dangerous and just had issues. So we're looking at putting protected left turns to help improve safety and let vehicles be able to make a left turn onto Tidewatch without too many conflicts. The next one, number 5, Cherry Point Road, Pearlstein Drive. As you can see, this is right in near a curve. Heading northbound, we're looking at providing a northbound signal head so vehicles traveling will know a signal is there more far in advance to improve safety. So that was from the study, but as we kicked off this meeting, there was more things that I know Beaufort County would like to look at, and we added 4 more additional short-term improvements. One is at the number 6, Oakety Center Boulevard North, and just for everyone's purposes, 4 out of every 10 crashes that happens on this 4-mile corridor shown from 1 to 7 happens at number 6. And so from a short-term recommendation, we're looking at converting that to a right in, right out using some channelization. I'll have an image of that in the next page. But currently today, vehicles cannot make a left turn out of there during peak hours, and most people use 278 to signal to get out. One improvement that's already been constructed from the study is the SC462 signal. That was good, but also what happened was the signal did allow some of the left turns to queue back into 170, so they into the through line. So we're going to be looking at retiming the signal as well as potentially adding more length for that northbound left turn lane, so vehicles don't end up on 170 through lane. And so we're going to look at just using existing pavement again to lengthen that turn lane. Number 8, this is in number 9, or kind of the number 8 basically is a restriping project. There's already pavement out there, but we're looking for vehicles heading westbound on 278 that want to exit off of onto 170, having 2 lanes to do that instead of just one. We know there's a very high volume and the pavement that's there that we're going to be able to get twice as many vehicles off of 278 faster, and just using restriping. Number 9 improvement is looking at changing the free flow and the merge. So currently today, vehicles come around the loop ramp and they have to go 700 feet and merge back into 278. We're recommending restriping it so they don't have to do that. They'll get their own lane. And then that's the higher volume. And then the directional merge onto 278, we're looking at they have their own lane. We're going to have them actually merge into 278. So we're kind of flipping who merges onto 278 and using the higher of the two movements to have a free flow. So I'll move on. So just kind of visually showing the Oakwood Center Boulevard. Just turn your head to the right. North is to the right. So you have 278, 270s to the north. Oakwood Center Boulevard South is number 1. Oakwood Center Boulevard North is number 6. And there's about a half a mile in between here. And we are pretty much making improvements along this entire section for the near-term improvements. Again, looking at number 1, the reduced conflict intersection, looking at having vehicles take a right and then go down and make a U-turn. And that's simply just, there won't be a signal there to begin with. That's a short term. This is a more intermediate term, but initially it'll just be an unsignalized right turn out and U-turn. And then at Oakwood Center Boulevard North, again, having a right in, right out. And we looked at the traffic volumes, and there's very few volumes making a left turn out today. Most of them go out to 278 to the signal using that. And it's mainly to improve crashes, help the flow, between the off ramps, and just improve capacity and safety. So now that you're familiar with Oakwood Center Boulevard from north to south, and mentioned that there is pretty much a whole project being done between this half-mile section, I was asked if there was any intermediate term project that would benefit from this short-term letting of projects. And I mentioned, we're improving everything except for at the eastbound ramps. And that's just roundabout in the middle. We have survey pretty much here, all the way up to here, but nothing's being done here. So I said, to show a project over a half mile and, the full redo of the project, it just seemed like this would be an improvement to add to your list, just so you have a whole section of projects that are done together. And I think it says all would be in the right of way, and we just require a design and, of course, the funding of the roundabout. And just let you know the purposes of why we chose a roundabout versus signal is mainly so Cecil Reynolds would have a way to get around this median. So they would go down, make a right, and then actually make a U-turn in the roundabout. So that way, they wouldn't be able to make a left before. They have a way to go back south towards Pitcherville by doing that. So that was one of the reasons. Plus, the roundabout works very well because the major movements don't even go in the roundabout. The loop ramp doesn't enter the roundabout, and the major on-ramp doesn't even go in the roundabout. So it actually works very well it's just through volumes really going through the roundabout, except for those getting off. So that was the reasoning for that. Just to go over a quick schedule, we're right on schedule today. Survey was complete last week. We're hoping to get the survey files processed over the next couple of weeks, and then hit design come December. So we're looking at everything I've mentioned, those 9 projects is going to design, and hopefully having a preliminary set of designs by, middle to late January, then so we can get them to the review agencies to look at them. And hopefully if all goes to plan, let sometime in June and get this thing going. So that's my update. Is there any questions?
Any questions from members?
I would like to say one thing, Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Sure.
I would strongly encourage council to instruct either the engineer or staff to reach out to the town of Hardyville, because many of those things that we're improving along Highway 170 are items that are addressed in development agreements within the town of Hardyville that require developers to do traffic impact analysis and do those improvements. So we may be funding things out of the county budget that are actually on developers' responsibility through development agreements in the town of Hardyville. So I would encourage you all to take whatever action is necessary to recommend that we sit down with the town of Hardyville and see what items we can pursue with the developers along that 170 corridor right there and enforce those development agreements on those developers without us expending county funds. We're happy to cooperate with them. We want to do that, but we don't want to take full responsibility for something that the developers are obligated to do.
Thank you. If I might, Mr. Chairman,
Sure.
I'd like to make that in the form of a motion that we direct staff to coordinate with the town of Hardyville regarding implementation through other funding sources, development agreements, et cetera, impact fees, whatever we might have available.
Is there a second for that?
I'd like to second that.
Okay, I also seconded. Comments?
Do we know how much of this is actually in Jasper County that we're talking about?
We're right on the
It
road.
looks like a
All
lot
of
of
that 278 is Beaufort County. Jasper County doesn't really start till further up.
not even the roundabout, okay.
No, all that's.
But it's town of Hardyville
Yeah,
incorporated.
town of Hardyville is there at the intersection and on the Horn property. There on the corner, and I think they go up 170 a ways, maybe to Argent as well, or maybe somewhere in that vicinity.
Other comments?
That's
Go.
Stu. The light at Tidewatch, that's going to be a left-hand turn signal, both going into Sun City and into Riverbend?
That's correct. It'd be a full protected, right now there's only a protected one way, I believe, Ryan, is that correct? And then this would be a full protected in both directions.
Yeah, there are no left-hand,
Oh, okay, there's none.
Yeah, so
none.
yeah, and I believe the left turns are completely aligned with each other, so they can't even see around when two
So
left cars are back to back.
Correct.
In this, Chairman Passman, there'd be no geometry change, but the signal,
Right.
the protected signal would allow for those two movements to act and move freely without,
Right. So that's
oncoming
something in the project schedule that could be done relatively quickly.
Yeah, we talked with AECOM and Ryan about that. So they're going to try to break out some of those components that have the signal component. That may even be something we can do in-house. We'll take a look at that with our traffic operations group, but we'll definitely try to break components out if we can.
Okay, thank you.
Chairman, can we get a copy of this PowerPoint?
Sure.
Okay.
Just a couple of,
Was that motion, was
We
that?
didn't vote.
I don't know.
we didn't vote yet, but I may
Codified.
make one or two comments leading up to the vote. I think this is a wonderful project, and compliments to Jared and how well he's managed it. You know, we had a section of road that was really failing and probably the worst one in the region. Craig Gordon was useful in terms of suggesting some paths forward. You know, we get AECOM on board sooner rather than later with the design piece. The DOT piece seems to fit nicely. They may have a resurfacing at that same intersection, which would get incorporated at the same time and have some economies of scale in one construction piece. Jasper, of course, has come along, and I'm not sure where they are now, but I know they, a couple weeks ago, had approved at first reading their contribution of the million. I don't know if it's gone all the way through yet. Relative to the motion, though, Hardyville, the mayor, and I spoke with him, they're basically looking for a presentation at some point, and then they can conclude you know, how much they want to put in. I don't think there's any thought that they shouldn't put something in. And the good part of all of this is that I think it's, if we have some extra bucks, there'll be some other things that we can work on. I think the concept that you talked about of pulling ahead things and looking at the medium term makes a lot of sense. And if there's some things even in the long term that make some sense, and we got to go back and get a few more bucks, I think that's worth doing it. So I compliment the staff on how well this piece has been moving along. Having said all that, there's a motion on the floor. Is there any objection to the motion, which is to coordinate sooner rather than later with Hardyville on their participation and involvement, and in making sure that their development agreements are incorporated so we don't spend money that we don't have to spend? I don't see any objections, so this stands approved as objected, as a motion. Is there anything else on 170 that you want to talk about?
No, that's all. Ryan, do you have any other things to offer?
I think that's it for now. Appreciate it.
Ryan, thank you for being with us. Great report. Looks like we're making some good progress.
And that's all from my report. I'm probably a first to have a recommendation, or motion and a recommendation on my report, but I appreciate that. And I think the next
I assume you were okay with that motion.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll get to work on that right away. And then I think the next four are all John. So
okay, John Rimbold, you with us?
I'm here. Thank you.
Good. Well, John's got 4 items for us. I told him that earlier today I was talking with him. He had one meeting not too long ago where he didn't have anything. I thought maybe we had offended him because normally he has 2 or 3 things at every meeting. But he assured me that was not the case. So tell us what you got going on, John.
Well, after
look
that,
at all items 8 through 11, if you would, and give us an update on all those, and then I'll take a vote on them together, but we can probably discuss them together.
Absolutely. I'll do my best not to disappoint, and I'll bring something to you every month. The first items, there's actually items for both of the airports, and this is another round of kind of federal COVID relief funding for airports, and this is part of the ARPA program that came out earlier this year. We were notified in the early part of the summer that this money would be made available, and then we're recently asked by the FAA to go ahead and make application for these funds if we intended to pull those down and use them. So that's what we're doing. The FAA is just trying to get all this together so they can plan for this in their upcoming year. So the Hilton Head Island Airport has 2 separate categories of relief. One is for airport operations, and you can see on the AIS that is pretty strictly governed. The use of those funds is pretty strictly governed. But personnel costs, sanitization, janitorial costs, operations, it's most things except for airport development. So the idea here is preserve jobs, enhance cleanliness, and the customer safety and experience of the airports. So that's the first category of that. The second is a concessionaire relief, and that's to specifically address just the hardships that COVID put on the travel industry and the associated businesses who work within the travel industry, specifically at airports. So you think of rental cars, parking concessions, restaurants, things like that. And so there's specific guidance on how to use that funding as well. So both of those categories are available for Hilton Head Island Airport, and you can see the numbers in front of you. And then very similar at the Beaufort Executive Airport, although in a much smaller dollar amount, is a grant that's available for operations, personnel, safety, sanitization, and that sort of thing, similar to Hilton Head Island Airport. So the first item here is the acceptance of those 2 grants, and what we have to do, it's kind of a formality. We do have to apply for those grants and just go through that process, but upon receipt of application, those grant funds would be available to the airport. So that's the first item that we look for.
Okay, we'll keep going and we'll come back and vote on all of them.
Okay, great. The second list of items that you've got in front of you are the capital improvement projects that we bring forward every year to have you take a look at. And these are, just to tell you, that in the FAA's planning It's a 5-year look ahead for capital projects at both airports. And so usually the first 2 to 3 years are pretty solid. Then the outlier 2 years are a little bit less solid because things do change as we move forward. But this allows the FAA to start to program those funds for each of the airports that it does support on the capital side. And so we've got this list put together and bring that forward to you. And kind of part and parcel of approving the project list is also your approval of, and I don't want to throw you here, but it's a pre-application rather than a formal application for the grants. And the way the FAA works is we pre-apply using the application form, but we pre-apply for these grants so that they can move forward with their out-year planning for the money. And then when the bids are taken, because these are all construction-related items, once we have hard bid numbers, that's when we make formal application for those grant funds. But the FAA needs the pre-application in order to program those dollars. So that's what that second item is. There's 5 years worth of projects at both Hilton Head Island Airport and Beaufort Executive Airport. And as I mentioned in the retreat, you'll notice that those are, primarily runway-related projects, with the exception of the terminal project being the first one at the Hilton Head Island Airport for 23.
Okay, this is really an update. We do this annually, as I remember, and you've pre-coordinated this with the FAA, as I remember.
That's correct. And there are times when, after we submit this to the FAA, that they may make a minor tweak to it, but it's typically not a major adjustment that they make.
Okay.
Okay, so there's a list for each of the airports. And then keeping with the pattern here, we've got another item for both airports, and that's a hangar rent increase at both airports. We haven't done this in a couple of years, so I'm coming back to you with, it's about a 5% increase, and kind of rounded it off to the nearest dollar to make it a little bit easier on our tenants. They've asked us not to put pennies in there. It's a little bit tougher for them to deal with, so we made nice round numbers. And you can see that in front of you here. So at Hilton Head, we've got a couple of different types of hangars, but at Beaver Executive, we've only got the T hangars, which is a smaller hangar. So you can see those amounts there. Small amounts, but that helps with projects we've got going. We recently replaced all the lights in the Beaufort Executive Airport hangars, all LED fixtures now. And I think all the folks who we have in those hangars certainly are enjoying that. Now we've got similar projects that are lined up for this winter time and early spring for Hilton Head Island Airport.
Okay, let's open up for discussion, comments, questions that you have for John on any of these 4. If I don't see you and you want to speak, just speak. Pretty much. One question, John, for you. As the federal government is pushing more money, in some cases, into things like airports, is that kind of outside of the FAA's regular, or is this just more funding that they run through their regular wickets in terms of what they can do and can't do? Do you know that?
My understanding is that the reason that these relief grants that have come out are pretty much de facto excluded from being used from development projects. They can be kept separate. Now, you can apply to use them as airport development projects, but there's a lot more steps to go through with the FAA staff to coordinate that. So I think what they're doing is, with these funds that come from the federal government through DOT to the FAA, as long as they basically restrict the use to personnel operations, cleaning and sanitization related items, they're able to maintain the normal funding levels in those capital airport improvement project program.
Okay. Anything else anybody has? If not, I'll take items 8 through 11, look for a motion to approve.
So moved.
Mark motions. Second? York seconds. Any further discussion? Any objection? Seeing none, these 4 items, 8 through 11, are approved without objection. Thank you, John, for all your hard work. Appreciate it. Next item is number 12, and it has to do a contract award for EMS station.
Yes, sir. So this is the third project as far as CIP for EMS stations over the last year and a half. So the first one was Shanklin, the second one was Red Barn that we just opened, and then this one is outside of Sun City. So this is the existing fire station that we're going to be upfitting in a similar format as we did at Red Barn with a cost share with Bluffton Town Fire District. This, again, is the existing station outside of the gates at Sun City. We put this out to bid. We received 3 bids on the project. We looked at all the different bidders and made sure they were qualified. The low bid was Brantley Construction Services LLC out of Charleston with a low bid of $1,234,000. So again, as mentioned, this would be a cost share with the town of Bluffton Township Fire District, 50-50. So with a 10% contingency, that would provide a total budget contract of $1,357,400, which our share would be funded through the 2017 GO bond. So staff's recommendation would be approve the contract to Brantley Construction for the IFB as listed.
Okay, discussion, questions, motion?
So move, Mr. Chairman.
I'll second, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, York and Alice, thank you very much. So this is the third of 3 of these that we're doing.
That's right. I think Phil probably got more schemed up for later, but this is the 3 that he had on the list.
Okay.
Just quickly.
Sure.
The location of this is where?
This is
I see William.
what's the somebody help me out with the restaurant, the popular restaurant.
Oh, the old ale house? The ale house?
The ale house. It's directly behind the ale house, right outside the gate near the food line.
Okay.
Okay.
Because there's a fire station there now, I think.
Yeah, so it's a fire station. We'll be upfitting it and adding on some storage and some bunk rooms, and then outfitting it with some EMS and then more fire. So it'll be a dual-purpose station once upfitted.
Okay, appreciate that. I need to get over Hilton here more often in Bluffton.
Yeah, this is Bluffton.
Thank you.
Well, Joe will let us know if it's not in the right. I forgot to mention we were talking about 170. He's our quality engineer on this thing.
Yeah,
so
that's right.
we've
Oak the
signed-
Ale House. Sorry.
We've signed Joe the responsibility on 170 and let us know if we're not doing the right stuff since he lives right in the middle of it.
I couldn't get off mute to let you know that it is the Oakady Ale House.
That's right.
It's next door. There is a street there. It's next door to the bank, across the street from another bank, and it's been there since Sun City opened, so it's well over 20 years old.
Okay.
Okay. I think did I do a motion?
We did a motion,
Okay.
we hadn't voted though.
Any objection to proceeding with this contract for roughly $1.3 million to be split with the Bluffton Fire Commission? Don't see any objections. That stands approved as submitted. The next item is one for consulting services on an electric fleet. We did talk a little bit about this at our retreat, and there's kind of 2 thoughts on this. Let me kind of put it forward as we move this forward. One is some of the monies that are coming down from on high include potentially electric fleets and things like that. And in order to participate in those, there needs to be a certain amount of things that we've done, like getting it through the SIB or through the whatever they want, the state and the federal silos are to move it forward. The other side of some of the conversation was it seemed like an awful lot of money to spend, and could we do it for less, or could we do it ourselves in-house? So just open it up for discussion, and maybe both you and Eric have some thoughts on what's the best way to proceed on.
Yeah, and I'll offer up a little bit to start with, and then we have Neil Desai. He's been leading this charge for us in Public Works over fleet. And then also online is our consultant. We don't typically bring the consultant to the committee level meeting, but they're here because they're, again, we started dipping our toe in this during the summer, knowing that this was something that was kind of being programmed in the upcoming infrastructure bill. It was also something that was discussed and included in the comprehensive plan that was just approved countywide. So we knew it was something that was out there. We looked at it real briefly, weren't sure that it was in any of our wheelhouses. So that's the reason we went out to bid. And just a reference point, similar to like road projects, and you're just talking about with FAA funding, a lot of time when the infrastructure bills and stuff like this pass, they're not all the times brand new sources of funds. A lot of times it's basically goes through the existing arteries that are already there. So for roadway dollars, say an infrastructure bill, there's more roadway dollars than there used to be. The mechanisms are already in place at a state level at the DOTs of all 50 states to receive those fundings. They just send more through those channels. So I did some research and I'm looking into it more fully, but from my understanding, similar to that for some of these electric vehicle and other source fundings, there's a congestion mitigation and air quality source of channel that runs through the federal highway and thus the DOTs. And that's where a lot of this funding, I think, is going to filter through. So in order to raise your hand for federal funding, like we have on our transportation project, you've got to set up a plan and an attack and a project, put that through LATS and on the tip, and then from the tip to the state, which is the STIP, which is the plan, and then you can raise your hand for federal funding. So just that's kind of overall background. So having a plan seems like the prudent approach, but Neil, if you want to give any more detail to that, that's kind of my 2 cents worth.
The only thing, Jared, I'd like to add is that with the comprehensive plan that recently was just adopted, this is in line. This program is kind of in line with what the comp plan says about particularly reduction in the carbon emissions. You know, a place for a healthy place, as Beaufort County being a healthy place for it to live. And so it's kind of in tune with that. And I just kind of wanted to make sure we added that for the chairman and the rest of council to consider.
Mr. Chairman, you have a question?
You have anything you want to say?
So if you all approve this today, I would request that you approve it with the stipulation of, as county administrator, I'm not comfortable with us recommending that we spend $269,000 to study electric vehicle fleet. I think we could probably get that done for a lot cheaper amount somewhere. I may be wrong about that, but so we either need to scale back the scope of this drastically to get it down into a more reasonable approach, or we need to not approve this. So I'm kind of dancing on you all. Leave it up to you all, but $269,000 for us to study whether or not we need to go to the electric vehicle route is a tremendous amount of money. We didn't pay much more than that for a comprehensive countywide comprehensive plan. So
I don't think we've ever overruled you, Eric.
No, I absolutely take Eric's advice to heart. I mean, I'm completely in line with that. It seems like it's an exorbitant amount of money for what really could be a month's worth of work for a halfway decent economist, or you know, even accountant probably could handle it. So I'm going to say no. I would vote against this right now. I think that it's certainly something that we need to look at. We need to have a plan for how this money will be, how we'll raise our hand for this money, how we'll get in line, et cetera. We need to have an outline of where we need to go. But $250,000 for a plan right now to determine the feasibility of it just really isn't appropriate. I would recommend that the administrator shop around, find out what other likely revenue recipients from this pool of money, what they are doing, and kind of follow along, find out who's doing the legwork on it, what kind of consultant they're taking, bringing aboard and to handle it, and then move forward from there, and dedicate no source of funding until we have something a little bit more concrete.
Mr. Chairman, I had a comment. I know there's probably going to be all kinds of people wanting to bid on something like this at this amount, but I do agree with Brian. I think it's a lot of money, but to me, this is something that lends itself to a regional approach or even other large counties similar to us, if we could do it that way, because we can't just say, no, we don't want electric vehicles. That's not an answer. But we need to look at it from a regional point of view, and if we could find another willing party to go in with us on it, it might help with the costs when they come. But I think at this time, we need to look at it not just as Beaufort County's vehicles, but others too.
All good comments. My sense is that we probably should not take action today and just leave it with staff to come back in due course, unless there's some real time pressing thing on this, which I see you shaking your head no. So unless there's an objection, we'll just leave it with staff for the time being.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I don't object to what you just said. I agree with you. I just want to weigh in.
Sure.
That I am very much in support of moving toward electric vehicles. And so I am looking forward to some type of proposal, just like Mrs. Howard said. So I just want to weigh in and say that I am very much support of electric vehicles. Yeah.
One thing I'd like to reiterate is the similar to a transportation project. Like I said, I just kind of outlined how it is going to funnel through transportation most likely. You've got to have some type of plan in order to say, hey, you're shovel ready. Whether it's this size or something else, that can be determined. We'll go back and work on that at staff level. But from positioning ourselves to attract federal funding, whether it's as a county or as a region, we've got to have a plan in place. And so we'll look at other ways and methods or partners that we can reach out to facilitate that. But that's going to be our goal as staff, is to get to a position where we have a plan that we can filter it through this, the LATS and the long-range plan up through the state, so we can raise our hand for federal funding opportunities.
Yeah, and I think Alice makes a very interesting point about whether we would do something within the region, because some of our sister counties may not be in a position to do it, and so it's good for all of us. I think it's a valid point.
Absolutely.
Okay, next item has some on-call traffic consultants, and you remember Jared talked about this, and this was one of a couple different groups that you were proposing to position ourselves, so tell us about it.
That's right. So as talked about in retreat, our goal is to position ourselves for the upcoming transportation projects that we have. We have a very lean staff, and the consultants help us, expert consultants on specific, we talked about before, transportation being separate from traffic, as well as right-of-way, and all those are specialties inside of the umbrella of transportation. So we're also concurrently working on a program manager to help us moving forward at large, but we got this one out sooner than the rest of them, is an on-call specific for traffic. So we have a couple people that we use sporadically throughout on our small A&E contract list. But what this will give us a kind of a more open capability for, in this situation, 3 qualified consultants. So we put out a solicitation in July. We had 11 submissions. We had a evaluation team internal to staff where we evaluated those, and we selected 3 being the most qualified, and that is Beal Engineering, Kimley Horn, and Stantec. So out of the 11, those are the 3 that we selected. We would propose having them, again, this is an on-call status, so we're not awarding a contract value. We would follow the procurement guidelines as laid out, depending on those thresholds that we discussed earlier in the finance meeting. But then we would use sources of transportation fundings, either our road use fees, our impact fees, C funds, sales tax, or any future grant funds to fund the specific project. So depending on what project it is, we may be able to use different funding sources, and based off the threshold of the contract value, we would bring it back through committee and council as appropriate. So this would just be, the staff recommends awarding to these 3 to have as a master agreement, and then we would award contracts or work orders to each consultant as the projects are defined.
So question, do we need a resolution for this, or is committee motion okay? Does anybody have a sense of that resolution?
Motion would be fine.
Motion would be fine, okay.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to do this.
Okay, good. Is there a second? Second from York. Further discussion? Any objections? Seeing none, this stands approved as motioned. Okay, the next item is number 15. This has to do with the funding of Graves Road. And if I understand this correctly, when we did the amendment to the development agreement, part of that was a payment that we were going to make to them with some milestones, and one of our funding sources may have changed, and so tell us about that.
Well, yeah, so essentially it doesn't really have anything to do with the development agreement.
Okay.
The development agreement obligated us to do some improvements to Graves Road and build the park access road, which is further down Graves Road and going into the park on the back side of the property through the Pepper Hall development. The previous administration designated, before we had the user fee issue for what we call the tag fee, had designated tag fee as the funding source to do the improvements for Graves Road and excuse me, and the construction of the primary park access road. So I wanted to discuss with council, given the situation where we are with the litigation in the state on the road user fee and the litigation that we're now involved in, if whether or not council wanted to take that $1.5 million from fund balance, and that would free up additional money for the tag fee for us to allocate to the CTC for road improvements on county roads. If given the reduction in the tag fee that we're having right now, most of the money, a significant portion of the money would go to the improvement of Graves Road, and that would leave very little left over for you all, for the CTC to have. So we do have adequate money in the fund balance to cover that. If you all wanted to reallocate, or you want to allocate money from the fund balance to do those improvements,
From the
instead of it
general
coming
fund?
from tag fee.
This would be from the general fund?
Yes.
Okay. So we had the obligation to pay, it's just a matter of what source it's coming from.
That's
And
correct.
you're suggesting that, given what's happened with the tag fees, it would make sense to consider using available general funds?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman, let me just ask a simple question. In the development agreement, we agreed to do something. Was there a condition in that agreement? No condition. So we obligated to do something. Thank you, sir.
Mr. Chairman, I'd just like to comment that we have to do it. I'd rather it not come out of the tag fund, so it frees up more money for the CTC to use. So I'd be in favor of this, even though I haven't been in favor of anything to do with Graves, but I don't see any other choice.
Okay. You want to put that in the form of a motion?
No, I don't want to make the motion.
I didn't think you would. Okay. Other questions or comments for Eric? I think you nailed it. It's an obligation we have. It's just a matter of where we're going to take the funds from, and that's your recommendation?
Yeah.
To do that?
Yeah, that's right.
I'll make it a motion, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, Brian makes it a motion.
And I'll second it.
Mark seconds it. Is there further discussion?
Chairman, just quickly.
Sure.
If we don't fund this, this obligation, what, I guess we subject to a lawsuit?
Right, I was going to say, at that point, we're exposed, and we need to do this. It's money we've obligated, we're going to spend. We don't want to not pay it.
And you're probably getting invoices already because of the
Yeah,
milestone.
we've got the invoices in hand. That's the reason why I have this on the agenda.
Okay. So we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion on
And
that?
the source of fund is general fund?
Right, source would be the general fund.
Thank you.
Okay, is there any objection to this? Not seeing an objection, this stands approved as submitted and recommended by the administrator. Next item is an agreement between the county and the city of Beaufort for block grant award on Depot Road.
Yep, so Depot Road is one of our 24 pathways on the sales tax program, 2018 sales tax program. This was a project that we were working together with the city of Beaufort, also showed up in their CIP program. They submitted a CDBG block or community development block grant for $200,000 for that, and they have received that grant. However, because it's a project in our coordination, we're actually administering the project as far as the engineering and the construction and the acquisition, right-of-way acquisition. So in order to administer that, the Department of Commerce requires us sign a subrecipient agreement. So basically the money will funnel through the city of Beaufort and to us, and we have to sign this in order to facilitate that. So that's what this is. So this would be an approval to enter into that subrecipient agreement.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion that
I'll
we
second.
go this.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
Well, I do have a question. The routing of which side of the road the sidewalk goes on, will be done by the county rather than the city?
Yeah, so we already have a preliminary design.
Okay.
I don't know that we've held a public meeting yet.
I don't think so.
But it is currently scheduled on the south side of the road. So there's a 5-foot sidewalk, at least on a portion, if not all of the north side of the road.
Mm-hmm.
So this would be a 10-foot pathway on the south side and the sidewalk on the north would remain.
But we will have a public meeting prior to, okay, thank you.
This is primarily, will at least begin the attachment of the Spanish Moss Trail.
Yeah, so
Okay.
the city of Beaufort's long-term plan is that the Spanish Moss Trail would connect to downtown. So this would be the first phase of that. So it marries up with both of our plans. It was on sales tax as well as their plan. So it was a good joint project, or is a good joint project. It's just a matter of us facilitating.
Okay.
One other comment on the pathways that's related. As mentioned earlier, the sales tax for the referendum comes off at the end of the quarter. We're going to collect another 10, 15 million, it sounds like, before we're finished. And money has to be used for one of the three things that are on the referendum. And I think a couple people have mentioned that potentially going back and doing some of the trails that were on the original referendum that we had more than we could afford might be a good use of that. Now, we won't know until January, February exactly how much we have left, but it does seem to me one of the things you all could consider would be, if you wanted to come back and say, hey, let's at least get on with the engineering of the paths and all, so we don't lose a couple of months. And I personally believe it's going to be difficult to pass another referendum if we have some items that were on a prior referendum that we haven't addressed.
Right. Mr. Chairman, if I might, my recollection is we approved $10 million worth of funding for sidewalks, and the list was well over $20 million.
It was like 20, you're right.
And you know, I think even beyond our wildest expectation, I don't think we're going to get an extra $10 million plus out of the sales tax. We might collect an extra 2 or 3 million at the most, but you're absolutely right. We need to attack these in priority and get them finished. That is of absolute paramount importance that we get it done as soon as possible.
Yeah, so I think the heads up for you all is if that makes sense to you, I think council would probably welcome you coming back and not waiting too long on whatever you need to do engineering acquisition wise.
Well, and we'll definitely facilitate that. Our current contract with our design consultant on the pathways has a contract value, and we're already at that value as far as what's programmed. So we'll need to come back in order to raise their value anyhow. So we'll go ahead and put that in process. And that would probably be, I guess it would be, we don't have a December meeting, so that'd be January. At that time, we'd have a pretty good idea of what, we don't get our statement until February 1st of the full collection, but I think we'll have a good idea of what we should have extra.
Good, okay. So is there any objection to this motion?
No.
Not seeing any, this stands approved as discussed. The next item has to do with the...
Mr. Chairman, if I could get a clarifying question.
Sure, absolutely.
So you're talking about, Jared, coming back to ask for more money for our consultant. Not a single mile, not a single quarter mile of sidewalk has been built. Why are we so far out of line with our consultant? Why hasn't more been built? Why hasn't anything been built?
The short answer is that these projects, even though they seem simple, like a pathway or a sidewalk, they're just as complex as a regular road project. So we've got to go through all the channels, all the survey, all the acquisition, all the permitting, just as if we were going to widen Boundary Street. I mean, some of them have a little bit less because they have less property acquisition, but we have to follow the exact same process, whether it's a 700-foot pathway or a 2,500-foot pathway. So we've been working through those on each of the projects. We have a couple that are getting ready to go out to bid, either at the end of this year or first of next year.
And they are which ones?
Bluffton Parkway. Brittany, you can help me out here.
Bluffton Parkway Pathway Extension and the Rebo Road Sidewalk Extension are planned to be leaded for construction the beginning of 2022.
And those
Salem Road is not in that group.
Salem Road is currently working through some design issues. We've been communicating back and forth with SCDOT. Once we have a preliminary design, another part of why we've been having some delays is also public engagement periods. We are supposed to be doing 2 per sidewalk, so we have done more than 2. So that is another factor of some of the delays, but your Salem Road is in design.
Thank you.
Okay, next item has to do with the acceptance of a right-of-way for Klein Circle.
Yes. So this, I think we've had one on every council agenda for the last month or so, but basically this is a legacy road off of Kings Neck Road in Sheldon area. It's 1,700 feet. And we're just continuing to perfect our right-of-way when there's an opportunity for that. So the residents, the property owners associated with this road have requested to donate the right-of-way to the county. This project, or this road, is not currently on our dirt road paving project list at the moment. But again, it's worthwhile when there's willing owners to donate that property. Let's go ahead and grab that so we can, if we want to do improvements later, we have that in front of us. So that's the request, is that we accept the right-of-way. This, again, is a legacy road that we own and we maintain, and this would be perfecting that right-of-way.
Any comments, questions?
Yes, Gerald.
Yeah, go ahead, Gerald.
Yeah, I would say to all of us, before I came on council, this road was designated to suggested to be paved, but there was some disagreements and dispute between the family members, and so the right-of-way issue, right-of-way donation was an issue, and so. Jared, we thank you for working with the family members to get this up and going again. And so it's going to be something that the folks on that road have anticipated and desired for quite some time now. And so to get it to this point is truly a milestone. So I would move to approve that we accept this contract for the right-of-way acquisitions.
Second? Oh, York, got second. We may have doubled up there, but any further discussion? Any objections to the acceptance? Seeing those, this stands approved. Next two are 18 and 19, probably take those together. We had apparently public meetings on 2 of the pathway sidewalks.
Yeah, and as you can guess, Brittany Fields, she's been, as her answer just now on the other pathway, she's been front and center on the pathways. So Brittany, if you want to talk us through both of those, and then you can bring it back to the chairman for whatever's needed from there.
Not a problem, thank you. So as per resolution 1944, we must conduct at least 2 public meetings for each one of the projects. The first public meeting for the 14 recommended was held virtually in the fall of 2022. We have then held a second public meeting for Stewart Point on October 5th, bringing it face-to-face to the community, and then held a 2-week comment period open until October 20th on this project. We have received 44 overall comments for the project in itself, as it's proposed an 8-foot wide shared use path along the roadway with a 5-foot grass buffer. And the majority of the comments are in support of the project moving forward. So as the recommendation, we are going to proceed with a 5-foot shared use path, 8-foot shared use path, a 5-foot grass buffer. along the roadway. We are holding another public meeting tomorrow night to inform the community of that decision. Is there any questions on Stewart Point?
No, no questions. No questions, Brittany. We look forward to meeting with the community tomorrow night, and I reviewed the survey, the results of the survey, and as you said, the majority of the folks are in approval of the 8-foot sidewalk. So we'll just get back with them tomorrow night and share the results of the survey, and hopefully there are no hiccups or changes to be made, but that'll give us the access to go ahead and start moving forward with this pathway.
Yes, sir. And we already have survey done, so as soon as we bring that forward to the community, we'll begin our design.
All right, we'll see you tomorrow night.
Well, we'll see you then. The second one is for Alljoy Road. Once again, we've held 2 public meetings prior to this, 2 public meetings. One was on September 14th, one was on October 28th. We've gone back and forth with the community on what their preference is for the pedestrian accommodation, and overall consensus of the community is that they would prefer a 6-foot sidewalk, which we will be using a 5-foot grassed buffer from the edge of pavement from Shad to Burnt Church Road. We do have we'll be bringing forward a recommendation for our Burnt Church design team in January. So we will then design the Burnt Church Road to connect to Alljoy.
Okay, comments, questions?
Yep, so obviously this is my district. We actually had, besides the 2, we had 2 additionals. We had 4 total meetings that we had. And you would think, well, gee, why would someone not want a sidewalk? And obviously there's people out there that didn't want their community to change. They didn't want us taking down trees. They didn't want us taking people's property. So there's a lot of things that were involved in that. And again, staff, when we first started, did a great job of designing a Mac Daddy sidewalk to go down through there. And after those 4 meetings and listening to people, we were able to, again, there are some folks that are still swayed against it, but again, the majority of people are looking forward to adding safety down there as we move forward. Now, one thing, Brittany, it does cross over at Shad and goes down to Thomas Lawton. I think you said it stopped at Shad. But,
yes, I'm sorry. Yes, it'll stop at Shad on the north side of the roadway, cross over the Alljoy Road, and then move down to Thomas Lawton on the south side.
Good. So again, the majority of folks all were in favor of it, or if they said they were in favor, if we could take care of some issues. And again, I think that we have been able to handle that 6-foot sidewalk that is less in width. They've also been able to figure out how to weave it down through the trees on the non-river side, so we take out as few trees as possible. But again, adding the safety that we've got, and then also we've talked about tying it into the Burnt Church and the Bluffton walkways as well. So again, I want to commend staff on a great job and actually listening to people and making changes. So thank you.
So you feel we're generally okay to go ahead with the design, and
yes,
even though there may be a few naysayers.
Exactly.
Okay. Any other comments or discussion? We don't need to take any action, I don't think, on these.
No, we haven't taken action previously on the others. Just basically come back and inform you guys where we are in the process. And then we appreciate all the council members, Councilman Lawson and then Councilman Dawson, Councilman Glover. We're coming at you with Martin Luther King, and then Councilman Fluellen will be coming at you with Salem Road. So appreciate all y'all's support in helping us coordinate with the communities. So anyhow,
when we do Depot Road,
Depot Road will be coming soon as well. So again, the one virtual meeting would qualify as the first, and then we'll have this second one here shortly.
Okay, put on the agenda just to catch up on the retreat topics. I thought we had a great retreat. I thought Jared and his crew did a great job. And I don't know if you want to comment on some of them. And I guess my thought process runs to I didn't hear any objections to any of the things that you were talking about. But if there's some that we need to talk about or get another nod, we're happy to do that.
I just kind of pulled the slides from we don't necessarily need to go through them. And maybe if you go to the first slide or the second slide there, and I can talk through them. But basically, airports, we're all, I think, moving forward on the terminal design. And then John mentioned the CIP to 5-year CIP or 3-year CIP at Hilton Head. One thing John didn't make mention of, but on the FAA, they only pay for the infrastructure kind of internal to operations. So one thing at Hilton Head is parking that's come up of recent. That would not be an FAA funded project. So that's not included in his CIP if you look in the backup documentation from earlier, as well as hangars. Hangars are not typically. Now, basically, if you have everything on your airport 100% up to snuff, and then you don't have anything else to spend money on, then they'll look at hangars. But that is usually hard to not find things that you can improve on the operations side before you get to hangars. So those are other projects that weren't necessarily listed. Mass transit, I do think it was well received. We'll be coordinating with Palmetto Breeze on different opportunities. I think there's also opportunities to partner with them with the new infrastructure bill and try to team up and see where there's places that make sense, how we can support their functions. Solid waste and recycling, we're coordinating with Jasper County, but we've got to look at some different sites that the county owns already as far as site planning. Our major hurdle right now is getting that site for the campus. Then we can actually start the design of the large MRF. Once we control that, then we can really start making a bigger impression on how our operations at recycling and then onto other components of solid waste. But we're going to be trying to talk with Jasper County and again, the regional perspective and see if maybe there's a site that's suitable that fits both parties in Jasper County. After we have that conversation with their staff, we'll come back and present to the committee and council from there. So that's where we are on solid waste. The facilities master plan, we talked about that. We're going to basically have the top couple projects as standalone. We are going to need to hammer out with you guys the long term as far as projects. So once we get decisions on some of the major components, i.e. the law enforcement center, the detention center, the administration building, those three big, the north or south administration component at Myrtle Park and what's needed there. Once we get those, then we can start backtracking a full implementation plan. But we can't touch one building until we touch this one, and we can't do that one until we touch that one. So we kind of have to have the back order reverse engineering on that. So that's what will be coming to you guys here soon. Transportation, the biggest thing upcoming in transportation is the possibility of a future sales tax program for next November. If we're serious about that, we've talked about it several times. We need to really start rubber meets the road discussing what we want to look at. One thing, the biggest thing being the time and length. Then we can develop the size of projects that fit into it. Also the what types of projects and which projects. We have a lot of that data, but we'll need you guys' input to give us some direction so we can really target that program and set that up for success. Public Works, electric vehicles, we already talked on that earlier today, and then the boat landing master plan. So the biggest component of the master plan, we're going to be doing that hopefully by mid-year next year. Summertime, we'll have that plan complete. And as mentioned in retreat, it will have a big cost to it. We probably won't have that back in time prior to budget, but even so, it's going to be a cost greater than general fund budget. So just something to think about and consider in the coming months. Any wild hair ideas you have on funding that, we'll take anything from staff and then we'll regurgitate it back to you. If you have any great ideas on how do we bring that to funding. So, but those are kind of the big ticket items, and any more detail, I'll gladly go into it. But
yeah, I think the reason for bringing it up, I think everybody, I didn't sense any objections to it, but if you see things that were missed as you go back through your notes and, let us know. Otherwise, I think we're proceeding on a path that says it's a pretty good day's work in terms of what are the things that we need to work on for the next year. In terms of the objectives, I did have a conversation with Joe and with Eric, and my sense is that if we look back, we've done a pretty good job of doing the ones that we had on our plate, and there's 5 that kind of make sense going forward. And 3 of those are related to investments, the work, live, play, invest concept. One is transportation. One is the facilities piece, I think. No, one is capital. One is the roads, and I forgot what, the other is the airport. But I think we've got a pretty good handle on what it is that we potentially need to invest in. Now we're down to what are the areas, what does the financial plan look like? So to me, those are three of our objectives that we need to do sooner rather than later to understand those. We've talked about putting mass transit as one of ours, and I was glad that was well received at the retreat. I think it does make some sense. And the last one is the ferry. And actually, we've got a meeting with the Savannah folks this Friday to talk about that in a little bit larger group. But to me, those are the five objectives that we as a committee ought to consider taking on. And if you want to add some to it as we go forward, let me know. But I think those are the five that we kind of have in front of us. Any conversation either on the retreat or the objectives for the coming year? Okay.
Chairman, before you go on, I just want to talk about the facility master plan, and I think staff is really looking to us to make some decisions, and so that they can move forward. And I'm hoping that they would bring that to us as soon as possible so that we can discuss it and after we debate it, set some kind of course of direction to give the staff. For example, I just use the public facility as one, the Depot Road, the EMS facility. I think those are decisions that we have to make so the staff can move forward and making some designs and get those facilities up and running and stuff. So I'm hoping that staff will hurry up expediently bring those to us so that we can discuss it, debate it, and then give y'all some direction.
And there's short-term funding needs and long-term funding. There's short-term funding needs, long-term funding needs, and long-term funding needs. That's the $300 million gorilla. But the short-term is just what you talk about, the EMS or the public works facility, just the design component. So that's $1 million, $2 million, something like that. And then all those buildings together, that's 15 or 20 million. That's the kind of intermediate term, and then long term is the $300 million gorilla.
And talking about the facility master plan, there's probably some major decision that as a council we have to make, Mr. Chairman, and that it sets a course of direction. We can prolong that and not make a decision, and it'll be subject to another council to make that decision, and that just put it further and further back. I think we just need to be as open and as transparent to say this is the direction of council as it relates to facilities, because we not only are dealing with county employees, we're dealing with the sheriff, we're dealing with all the entities, and those decisions has to be made by somebody. And I think it's best that as chairperson of this committee, you be the front person to say we're gonna move in that direction and just deal with it accordingly.
Well, shame on us if we kick the can down the road.
That's right. I agree with you, 100%. Thank you, sir.
Okay. Any other comments? Okay, well, we'll get close to wrapping up here. Let me expand a little bit on the potential of a referendum. Jared touched on some of this. It seems to me one of the issues we've talked about in the past a little bit is we've always historically kind of done these in 4-year bunches, but there is a rather interesting argument that I've kind of come around to, which is it may be better to look out further. We know that construction costs are rising a lot faster than borrowing costs. And if we do decide to go out further, we can actually do more projects and then pay for them over a longer period of time. So that's one of the pieces that we have to deal with. And the other is that the time is kind of short. We purposely said we would wait until after the referendum on lost so as to not muddy that up. But really, in reality, probably in the next 2-3 months at the latest, we've pretty much got to come to grips with where we're going. Doesn't mean that we have to do the final approval maybe until the spring, but we've kind of got to see, because there's an awful lot of work that goes into one of these. So stay tuned, but I think that's a high priority for us. So we're at the wrap up. I just had one or two items to wrap up with, and I'd like to touch briefly, and if you could, Sarah, could pull it up. Let me tell you where I kind of think we are on the corridor piece, because there's been things that have been in the paper and so on. But to go back in time, there's been a lot of community concern about certain things.
Hey, Stu, before you do the wrap up,
Sure.
do the vacancies, because we have to take action on them.
Well, okay. Thank you, Joe. We actually have 3 sets of vacancies, and I don't know whether we have any candidates for any of these. Do we?
I do have candidates for the District 9 Transportation Committee.
Okay. Well, I apologize. Thank you, Joe. Okay. So this is transportation, and you have one for District 9?
Yeah, my district, yes.
And who is your recommendation?
It was John Shatner is who I'm recommending at this point, but I need to talk to the chairman of that committee.
Okay. And are there any other nominations for this? Okay.
I'll second the nomination, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. So this will move on to council then, if that's the only recommendation that comes from the sitting council member. District 7, I don't know which district that is. Who has District 7?
That's Logan's.
Logan, okay. We don't know of anybody for that, I don't think. Okay. Construction Adjustment Appeals Board, we have 2 vacancies that had to do with professional and contractor. Do we have any, have we had anybody submit for those that you know of? Okay, we don't. We'll leave that one open. And then we have keep the county beautiful, and we have District 7, which would be Logan, and District 8, which is that Chris?
That's Chris's.
I was working on one for that, and I thought that there was a submission forthcoming.
Okay. So we'll just leave that one open then.
There may be, I've asked Logan about one for his district, so there may be something coming on that.
Okay. And our rule is if we don't have a member from somebody's particular council member, then we can look beyond that to other applications and pick somebody outside of the district that's involved. But Joe, thank you for bringing that to my attention. So let me just touch briefly on kind of where I see 278. We, of course, about a year ago, initiated the independent review. Town joined with us. I think that went pretty well, and I think they basically confirmed many of the things of where DOT was, and it didn't totally put to bed all of some of the concerns in the community, but I think they certainly addressed them, and hopefully many people recognized that particular piece. The second thing we did was to say it looked like we need some kind of a land planning exercise, so we actually appropriated money for that. At the end of the day, the town decided to do that on their own nickel, but we haven't been part of that. But they have that land planner has come forward with 24 recommendations. I think some of those were discussed at the staff level meeting with DOT, and some of those may be under consideration by them. But I thought what might be useful, and we're looking to have them come in at some point in time and brief us on that, because our role, as I understand it, is the kind of the client is Hilton Head and the contractor is DOT, but we're kind of in the middle. Explain what our exact responsibilities are, Eric, so I don't mess it up.
When it relates to Highway 278, the client is Beaufort County. This is a Beaufort County project.
Okay.
And DOT has agreed, and we're working on an intergovernmental agreement with them right now that we're getting ready to finalize by the end of the month. South Carolina DOT is the project manager on behalf of Beaufort County, but this is a Beaufort County project.
Okay.
We're working with the town of Hilton Head on some design elements with the land planning exercise that you see up here. But this is a county project that DOT is handling project management for on behalf of the county.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that. So the land planning people have put together, I think it's 24, 26 recommendations, which are in green here. We won't try to run through all of those, but at some point in time, we'll obviously catch up with the town and with the land planners. For purposes of at least looking at it, if you could go to that first sheet that's in white, I took the liberty of taking the 26 recommendations they had and just kind of grouped them into 4 groups, which we may or may not find useful. But 3 of them kind of relate to the bridge, has to do with the arrival experience. You know, how wide does it need to be, and have we made it as much of a gateway that people want. So that was 3 of their issues. The next, on the other side, there's 6 there that kind of relate to the Stony area, and there's a lot of moving pieces in the Stony piece, and I won't read through these, but there are various things that have been suggested that I think DOT will be looking at in some form as we go forward. If you go to the next page, and by the way, I asked Sarah to send this out to you so you have it. There's a bunch of issues that are, in my mind, on the left-hand side, more between the town and the design than they are in our, but they're the logical ones to bring them up. Things like, you know, where should the trails be and how wide should they be and what should the signage be? And then on the right side, there were 6 of them that kind of related a little bit beyond the transportation piece, but things that could be done to improve the overall community, particularly the Gullah community in that particular area. And then in the lower right, I think there's 3 that, along with a lot of other things that DOT has put to bed, that I don't think anybody disagrees with. One would be having a reduced speed through the entire corridor, so it's a more gentle arrival experience. We talked about ourselves at, I think it maybe is at the retreat, about whether the bridge, a single bridge, should be broken into 2. And we talked about it and the impact of potentially delaying and risking some of the funding and the extra cost. And we as a council said that one doesn't make sense to us. And then there's always been a question about whether it be a single signal at Jenkins Island. I think this is probably important to the Windmill Harbor folks, for both Chris and for Larry, and I think there's no objection that that's what should happen. So anyway, these are kind of the issues that I see on the table as it continues to get boiled down. So just pass that along as a way to look at what are the issues that are out there.
If I might, Mr. Chairman, many of the items on the recommendation list have been either moved to a later date on the process, like those non-project related items. Those are not even under consideration now. DOT is looking at maybe a half a dozen of these recommendations to see what they can do to accommodate the recommendations. So I just wanted it to be clear that not all of those recommendations that are on the list are still on the table. Some of them have actually been removed from the recommendations, and Town of Hilton Head Island is having MKSK update that list and provide cost estimates for what that's going to be. Many of these items are cost issues. County administration will not be recommending any more county funding for 278. And it's our understanding from South Carolina Department of Transportation, who has been, Secretary Hall, who has been more than generous with the county in allocating additional money to this project, that there will be no additional funding coming from SCDOT with regards to this project. So anything outside of those of county funding and SCDOT funding will have to come from some other source, either the Town of Hilton Head Island or some other funding source at the state level outside of DOT. So I just want that to be clear. One of the items I picked up in the newspaper, in the media this weekend, is about using the existing bridges as a pedestrian pathway or park. I think you all have some specific experience with the cost of maintaining old bridges. Here, Broad River Bridge comes to mind. It's our understanding from DOT that in order for us to maintain existing bridges in the way of a park, you're looking at about a $350,000 to $360,000 a year funding allocation just to do that maintenance. From an administration standpoint, that makes no sense because we are going to build the new bridges with pedestrian accommodations on those bridges. And I think that should be sufficient for the amount of use that the bridge would get for pedestrian components. And we should invest our money into those, into the new bridges and making those as aesthetically pleasing as possible and as accommodating to multimodal traffic as feasible without it experiencing a lot of cost overruns. So I'll be glad to answer any questions about any of that. I know I went through a lot right there.
I had a question about reducing the speed. Is that off the table?
No, reducing the speed is something that DOT is willing to look at.
I'm just surprised. I'm just surprised.
And also some lane width reductions on some of the interior lanes, not the outer lanes, and not any lanes on the bridges. They cannot reduce the width of lanes on the bridges.
And during the retreat, we talked about the HOA lanes, maybe the lanes that for emergency could be used for HOA, like the buses at certain times a day.
We can have that discussion with DOT.
Yeah, I remember that coming up, so, okay.
I think on the bridges also, DOT would be glad to give them to the county. It's just that we wouldn't want to take them. Because you also have the obligation at the end of their life cycle to have to tear them down.
Yeah.
And that's a couple $1 million at that point in time. And they were looking at 8 to, I think, to take them down.
Again, administration would not be recommending to you all that we take ownership of those bridges. I'll tell you that. So,
Hilton doesn't have the
Say it again now.
we will not be recommending to you all that you all take ownership and maintenance responsibility for those existing bridges.
Right.
And it would change the whole design relative to the foot of the bridges also.
I think it could impact the project more than we imagine and could potentially delay the project further. And I don't think we want to do that. To Councilmember Flewellen's point earlier, we have got to start seeing some construction on some of this stuff that we've got in place, and I'm anxious to get that done and to start moving some iron on some of these projects so we can get these things underway. So
if I could make a comment about the potential reuse of that the existing bridges or portions of them that have already been in the county for a long time. I commend Representative Bradley for spearheading that. I have always been a real huge fan of thinking outside the box, and this is certainly one of those outside the box thoughts. My problem is I really don't see us ever recouping the annual maintenance expense ever. I could see it being a mild draw, but not the kind of draw that brings in $350,000 to $500,000 a year in perpetuity. So I just don't see that this is cost effective from the county standpoint. And again, I commend everybody who's thought about this for the outside the box thinking we need a lot more of that. This one just doesn't work. Thank you.
very well said.
Mr. Chairman, just quickly, Mr. Greenway, I want to make sure you made a statement about the ownership of this 278 project is the county's responsibility?
Not the ownership, but the 278 Cordell project is a county project.
And so funding is coming from various sources at this time, and we have a budget moving forward.
Right.
In the event, whether it's delayed or cost overrun, that's going to fall on us?
We will have to figure out a way to fund any overages from this point forward. Yes, we have a dedicated source of the 1 cent money impact fees, the SIB allocation, and the DOT allocation. according to DOT, every year that we delay the project,
It's $1 million.
that in itself is $1.5 million price tag. So-
That's per month, I think. That's per month.
Yeah, per month, yeah.
So, once we get started with this project, for whatever reason, the funds run out and we cannot complete a road, that's it, huh?
Yeah, those are the types of things that keep me awake at night, Councilmember Glover. So.
Okay.
We've got a lot of big ticket items that you all would look, to your point earlier about identifying the priorities. Staff has a lot of things that council would like for us to work on. I'm faced with the possibility here of providing you all with a budget recommendation in a few months and trying to give you all a balanced budget based on just generation of revenues without a property tax increase is a daunting task for me with everything that I see that you all would like to do in the next few years.
Anybody can do it, you can do it.
Well, if anybody can do it, the finance team and all the talented staff members we have can do it, but.
Yeah, we got reappraisal coming up as well, and that kind of limits our ability to increase the rate of ad valorem taxes.
That's right, yeah. Exactly.
Okay, I think we've had a long meeting, a good meeting. And I would point, we don't have a meeting scheduled in December, but Jared and I have talked, if we have enough stuff that needs to move forward before year end, we'll figure out a way to get that done rather than wait till January. But
I recommend, Mr. Chairman, that you do it on Christmas Day.
Okay.
That's the, now, just go ahead and publish that.
Well, Bjork will have to do it as the vice chair.
I'm not gonna be here, but anyway, I got one thing, Mr. Chairman. Jared gave a list to me of 5 items. 4 of them have been sort of talked about. The 5th one have not. And I don't know whether any discussion is being made at this time, but.
This was on the facilities piece?
On the master plan
for the facilities, yeah.
And that 5th item really kind of disturbed me in that if we gonna do something with that 5th item, it's sort of time sensitive. And I'm just wondering where things are with that, Jared, at this time, because, if it's not time sensitive anymore, then it's not time sensitive. But if it is, I think as a council, we need to address that and move forward.
It is time sensitive. So the 5th item for everybody, just as we talk about facilities master plan, there's some standalone projects we've mentioned a couple of times, the public works, the EMS. But the 5th item is, are there some properties that we need to identify now that maybe are available now, whether we know our full intermediate and long-term plan fully already or not? Is it worthwhile to invest in some property to give us the latitude and ability? So those are the type of decisions that we as staff need to get to you in short order to discuss. And again, those are our property type acquisitions. Does it make sense for us to look at this parcel? Or if not, it might be bought and sold and there's no chance to look at that parcel at a later date. So we'll get that to you in short order, but you are very correct that if there's properties like that are out there on the market, it'd be worthwhile to make a decision on that as well.
And the reason I raised the question because of what you just said, the holiday season and council not meeting is no sense coming back for a Christmas meeting and stuff to deal with this if we can deal with it now. So that's why I raised the
I think if we have some things we need to do, what we probably do is one of 2 things. Handle them, let's say, the same day as our meeting, our December meeting, you'll only have one, perhaps at an executive committee meeting, or we could do a public facilities meeting earlier in the month. Just take care of any items that we have.
On that 13th is a executive committee meeting as well before that council meeting. So there's an option there as well.
Yeah, we'll try not to distract.
I would recommend, Jared, everybody remember we'd want to talk about those kinds of things in executive session.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, well, good meeting. We stand adjourned. Have a good evening.
Get it away.